Hello ladies, today I'll be talking to you about many different things. This is a homemaking support video, the purpose being that you can listen to somebody who is on board with you about staying home and liking it and taking care of it and having a good attitude. I don't have comments on the YouTube channel because I want you to go over to my blog, for which I'll provide a link, and make a comment there and see what I'm all about, and go and visit my friends on my blog sidebar. Also, my PayPal is there. And ladies, you are so helpful when you leave me a comment. Please leave your comments because they give me some ideas of what to talk about. Now, I am going to talk about several things today. I am going to talk about attitude, dress, house, and people. And the reason for that being that these things are all intermingled in the homemaker's life. And so I'm not saying you're going to be in the house every single minute. You're not. You haven't, we all have so much freedom now. Everybody has more than one car. We go when we feel like going. I'll be right in the middle of something, maybe washing clothes, and realize I've got to get something to repair something in there, and I'll write it down, and in a few hours I will go and get the things that I need. So we're very, very flexible at home. We're not confined at all. Life is not confined or unvarying at home. So I talked to you before about how we often had Bible speak in our house. We would use certain phrases to emphasize a point, like behold, what I have feared the most has come upon me, was one of our favorites. And but we also had old literature speak too. So we would often quote things that we had learned from reading old books of the 1800s, and especially Elizabeth Gaskell, especially some Charles Dickens, and some Jane Austen, although with reservation, some of them had some pretty good quotes. So I will be using these throughout, plus figures of speech, of course. And I don't have any figures of speech today, but I might use some and not even realize it. So today, I'm going to start with attitude, and I'm going to show you how attitude and dress and the house and people are all intermingled. Okay, to wake up with an attitude, let's say someone says to you, good morning, and you say, well, that remains to be seen. That's a bad attitude. That's also second guessing God. We don't know what the morning is going to bring to us, but what we do know is that we are supposed to react to it in a positive way. I told you about Philippians 4:8 and how much more there is to it than just memorizing it and saying, oh yeah, it says we should talk about things that are good. There is a lot more to it, because it can get in your soul, and you begin to view life from a better and happier viewpoint when you decide to replace those negative thoughts with the good thoughts. And the Bible is full of this. I use the word negative because I don't have anything else to use, but I use the example of the spies in Canaan and the ones that came back with a bad report, and how God was not pleased with them. They said, oh, there's giants in the land, and this and that and the other thing. But the ones that said, we can take the land, and looked at it on a positive side, found favor with God. So you can't wake up and saying, oh, I can't do it, I can't cope with this, and I just cannot succeed. This is just a very bad attitude. I don't think it's God's will for us to be that way. I don't think that you're going to receive the blessings of heaven from that attitude. And that takes me to the kind of the atmosphere today. It's popular, especially young people, to go around saying life sucks, and our country is bad, and it was founded on wicked principles and all that. I don't think that's pleasing to God either. I don't care where you live. I think that we have to have an attitude of gratitude, and that you should not criticize your husband, your children, your family, your home, your parents, your house, the land you live in, the way things are going, even the president or prime minister or the king. I think the Bible tells us the approach to that, and that is to respect and to pray for them. So substitute prayer for criticism. And if I was giving you an assignment, I would have you come back with a list of the things you normally criticize and how you prayed for them. And so your attitude, this is going to take a while. The last video, I think, lasted about 40 minutes, and I'm hoping that I can speak a little bit longer. If you are an older woman, and I will speak to the younger ones, but if you are an older woman and you want relevance with younger people, you just cannot be morose. You cannot demoralize or bring down everyone's mood by naysaying every single thing they say. Now, you don't have to agree with it, but you can say it in such a way as it gives them something to go on, something to work towards, and leave them feeling lifted up. You know, the Bible does talk about us encouraging one another and lifting one another up and leaving us each other in better shape rather than pulling each other down. My husband often has an illustration in sermons about how easy it is to pull someone down. And he said that a young woman came to a minister and asked, this is just such an old illustration, like it dates way back to the 1940s. And she asked the preacher if she should marry a certain young man that didn't have good principles, wasn't a worker, wasn't a hard worker, wasn't a worker at all, had some very bad habits and some vices, and in general was not did not live respectably, but she was crazy about him and she wanted to marry him, and her parents sent her to talk to this preacher, and the preacher said, okay, get up on this chair. So she stood up on the chair, and he said, see if you can pull me up on the chair. Something like that. Might have been a desk. See if you can pull me up on the chair. And she couldn't do it. So he said, now I'm going to see if I can pull you down. And right away, of course, he was able to make her hop down. So this was just an attitude explanation and illustration. Bit silly, but it shows how it's so much easier to pull someone down than it is to lift someone up. So if you're a lifter and not a leaner, you know what? You're strong and you're a hard worker. At least you're trying. It's harder, isn't it? It's harder to think up than it's easier to think down. So if you are an older woman, you cannot demoralize people. And if you want to, you know, everybody thinks about youth. We don't want to all be decrepit and dying and old. We want to live while we live. And if you want to have a more youthful appearance, you have to have an uplifting voice. You cannot be talking down all the time. So you have to avoid hard attitudes. Now I'm going to switch over to the young right now, because if you think that you are going to change when you are older, maybe you'll be more positive when you're older, and you're negative now. I'm using these word positive, negative, because I don't really have, I'd like to use more biblical words, but these are the things, this describes what's in the Bible about the negative and the positive. And the ones that were thinking on the downside of everything didn't succeed. The ones that were thinking that they could do it would do it. And we also talked about in one of the previous videos, I've mentioned Nehemiah many times. I'm so amused by that story, as well as some of the things that Elijah did. But these people, when, you know, the trolls, the negative, the naysayers, the downers, they've always been there, always. In fact, I read somewhere that when people were excavating some of these pyramids and looking more closely at them, they found graffiti written all over them that was saying negative things like, you won't build this, and this won't last, and this remains to be seen. I love that one. That's a real favorite of people who are negative. Well, yeah, that remains to be seen. Do you know when America was created, and the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution were written, someone in Europe said, well, it remains to be seen if you can keep that country going. And they've been saying it ever since. Well, it's the same with your family. You get married, sometimes there's a negative going on even when you get married. Well, it remains to be seen if that couple will stay together. Well, it remains to be seen if they can raise those kids. Well, it remains to be seen if they can keep that house. I mean, just this negative that goes on. And in the book of Nehemiah, you know, the enemy knew that they didn't really destroy, they couldn't destroy the walls of Jerusalem that were being built, but they could destroy the mind, and they could say, that's not going to work, and you people can't build, so everybody knows that if you want to defeat someone, and even if you want to defeat a nation, first you can demoralize them. Just tell them they're no good, tell them they can't do anything, tell them they're wicked, and get them to crawl in a hole and hide and weep and be unhappy. Then you can move in and defeat them. And some people are so defeating that even if someone did come and conquer them, they would probably be destroyed themselves by the attitude of the people they conquered. So, or they begged to go back home. Okay, so avoid a hard attitude. So I want to talk to the younger women, well, younger and older at the same time now. A hard attitude, you know, if you have too much worldliness in your life, if you've watched too much bad news, if you've watched and if you've read things that are worldly and hard, you know that it can actually harden the look in your eyes. It'll take away that. If you want to look young, older women, you've got to have innocence. And if you'll notice, a lot of older people can either be innocent or hard, but the hardened, it's in the eyes. That's why those of you who wear cosmetics, it's good for you to go to the mirror, put on your lotion, and you know, fix your face and try to look pretty, and look at your eyes while you're doing it. If you have been arguing a lot, you can get a hardness, a hard look to your eyes. If you're negative a lot, you can have a hardness in your face. So look at your eyes, you know, read what the Bible says about the eyes, because they're a mirror to the soul. And a lot of people, that used to be an old expressions, the eyes are the mirror to the soul. And it's hard to understand that until you understand how you can look hard from bad thoughts, from evil thoughts, from demoralizing thoughts, from jealousy, from defeat. And so watch these defeating attitudes. Now let's talk about how clothing and how dressing can affect the attitude and vice versa. If you have a hardened attitude and not a very bright attitude, you're going to reject anything that's pretty, anything that's lovely. You're just going to go into a mental slump. And your clothing reflects your attitude, and your attitude has an effect on what clothing you choose. So these things go together. And the clothing is something that, if you, as a homemaker, will go ahead and dress up in the... Oh, by the way, speaking of clothing, I had this all ready and forgot to show you. I'm wearing a dress of 100% cotton. It is made of David fabrics, which I got at Walmart a couple of years ago, and they had it in transposed colors, like they had a pink background with black dots, and this is a black background with pink dots, and it's quite old. And I have found that sewing piping on the edges of these garments actually makes these garments last a lot longer, because it's at the edges, the sleeves and the neckline and the hem, that they get thin. So I've worn this quite a while. It started out as a dressy dress. Now I just wear it every day. But the quiet lady that anonymously sent me a set of 6 teacups, I found one that matches this dress, and it has a black background and a pink rose, a pink flower. And it's very hard to find anything to match this dress, so I'm very happy. I got my wish. I got a pretty teacup, and I love these teacups. They're smooth. They don't have a rough finish on them. And the company is called Brew to a Tea. Interesting. So thank you. I'm going to use it. It's mine. Okay, so if you'll dress up in the morning, then you won't have to change your clothes if suddenly you have to go out, or suddenly you get called out, or there's something going on, and you will never be embarrassed. Now, the mornings that you decide you're going to schlep around in your pajamas and slippers, that's the day everybody seems to come to the door, isn't it? So if you want to defeat a person, if you want to demoralize a nation or demoralize a family or a person, just dress them in things that aren't very nice, that aren't very pretty, because clothing has a big effect on people. In fact, in the Old Testament, God told people how to dress for worship, and they had to have special garments that were set aside only for worship. They had to be clean, they had to be a certain type of flawless design and material, and it had to be a certain length and a certain this and a certain that for worship. That's the only thing I can find in the Bible about worship clothing. But in general, if you have respect, which is something I'm going to include on this include in this lesson, if you have respect, if you have self-respect, and if you have any love for other people, you will dress in a respectable way for worship and for home, because you care about what they see. You care about the effect that it has on them. Clothing has an effect on people in your home. And I have talked about royalty. In fact, I found a couple of old tiaras in my stuff. They're just plastic, I think, but we used them one time in a lesson for little girls about how to behave like royalty of the Bible. And I almost put one on today. We used to wear those way back in the 1940s or 1950s. People just wore them as, women just wore them as like a barrette or like a little comb or something. It was not unusual. They weren't just for Miss America. So anyway, I have a couple of them and had thought about wearing one to illustrate this lesson of behaving like royalty. And that royalty does not walk out in their pajamas and go around shaking hands with people. They have certain protocol, they have certain rules they have to follow. And they live a little higher than the population. They dress better. And I think that you should dress better than your circumstances. I think that's a great lesson. Dress a little better. Don't you remember in the movie series Wives and Daughters, where, goodness, I can't think of the name. Now my kids would know the names of all these characters. Where there was supposed to be somebody of royalty, a duchess, that came to a dance or a party, and one of the women had gotten there early and dressed up and put whatever poor jewelry she had on, or a cloak or something that was very special, and she came, and the Duchess came in casual clothes, and she was so disappointed. And she said, "Here am I, all dressed up in my finery, and the Duchess, what an excuse for a Duchess, and she comes in nothing. She comes in no particular. Where's her coronet? Where's her jewels? Where's her?" She was so disappointed. So that's just an illustration to show that we expect a little bit better of royalty or dignitaries. And so as a homemaker, you're the queen of the house. You're the first lady of the right house. You should dress in a way that people in the home will look up to you, that you will always have dignity. When they grow up, your sons and daughters will say, "I never saw my mom in and name this horrible garment that they see people running around in today." And I will honestly say, from the photographs of our ancestors that we have, photography began way back in the 1800s, and we have some of those photographs of all of our relatives. You never ever saw a group in a family, a group of people in one of those photographs wearing shorts. You wouldn't see the men or the women wearing shorts. You would not see the women dressed in such a casual way that even those that were on the farms had lovely clothes and normal shoes. They were dignified, and you could be proud to say, "I never saw my great-grandmother in a, whatever." So we should move on from that a little bit, but that's just to show you how clothes. There was an old English poet who said, "Clothes maketh the man." Yes, you put on a new set of clothes, you feel like a different person. That's beautiful. 2 things that help you start the day is attitude, good morning, and don't say "that remains to be seen," and the clothing. You start dressing a little bit different, and life might take on a different attitude for you. Okay, so the attitudes, there's a cultural thing going on that I can't quite name. I can't quite put my finger on, but uh, as I said before, if you want to defeat someone, or you want to defeat a church or a family or a home, you start criticizing them so that they will start to think less of themselves, start to feel inferior, start to constantly grovel and apologize, and pretty soon you've got them open to defeat and suggestion. And so there's an attitude that that there's sour people. And Homemaker really has to guard and guide her home. Titus 2 says she has to guard the home. There's another verse that says she has to guide the home. You have to guard your home against these sour attitudes. And they are such sour people that if you were to finally agree with them just to keep them quiet, and you finally say, yeah, you might be right, they're even more unhappy. They will accuse you of being insincere. So even if you decided to let them defeat you and you agree with them, they're not happy, because what they basically want is to keep fighting. The other thing is that there's an attitude now that if you tell someone, and make sure that you're not like this, especially you younger ones, if you tell someone a different narrative than the one that they want to believe, they feel like you're being hostile to them. That's all over the place. You tell them something and they're just very upset, or you might correct something in their lives, maybe even in the most gentle way, and they will still be upset because they don't want to be happy. You might even tell them how they could improve things or how they could be happy, but if they don't want to, they're going to be very unhappy with you. Now, I'm going to give an example of this. A woman was talking to me the other day, and she called me up and she said, I just had the most shocking experience. And I said, well, what was it? She said, this young woman who we're associated with through business called me. She's not married. She has sisters and she has parents and apparently lives at home. But she had borrowed a book from me, and I had not read the book, but someone had given it to me, she said, and I had not read it, but this young woman said, oh, I've heard of that book. Could I borrow it? So I sent it home with her. Well, later on, she'd read the book and become offended because there was something in it that she didn't like. Some relationship that didn't work out or something like that. And she's very, very depressed by it, very offended. And that's another thing, is we've got this snowflake generation that everything must work smoothly for them. And I often remembered of the people that told, I believe it was Moses, speak to us smooth things. Don't give us hard things to think about. Speak to us smooth things. So it's a generation that wants smooth things. Anyway, I said, well, what was the problem? She said, well, after she read it, she phoned me up and spent 20 minutes yelling at me. I said, well, what did you do? Well, I told her I didn't know what was in the book. And she said, yes, but you lent it to me. And as a older Christian woman, you should know better, because it demoralized me and it violated my my sense of uprightness or something like that. And so this woman said that she got to thinking, and now this is an older woman. If that had been me, I probably would have just started arguing about this or that and everything, but I've learned my lesson over the years and I've become a little bit wiser about stuff like this. I said, why didn't you just tell her that she was being rude, or why didn't you just, cut the conversation off? She said, there's a lot to consider. First of all, this girl had relatives that were friends of their families for many years, generations as a matter of fact. They were all members of the same church and they worked in a business together. She couldn't risk offending this girl, but the girl was determined to argue and determined to be offended, and she already was offended. She said, I had to be careful because I was treading on thin ice. Oh, there's a figure of speech for you, treading on thin ice. She says, I'm treading on thin ice. We often talk about it, walking on eggshells. You don't want to break these eggshells. but she's treading on thin ice because if I offend her and I talk back to her, she'll report it to her mother and also people at business and people at church. So I've got a whole thing that's going to come, my life will come crashing around me if I offend this woman. So I said, what did you do? She said, well, I just let her speak. And whenever she said, and such was in this book, and I didn't like this character, and I didn't like that character, she said, I said, oh, I'm so glad you told me. You know, I didn't read that book, but I'm glad to know that that's in there. And so the woman, the young woman, went on and yelling at her, calling her, she said, you've just done me wrong and all that, because I would have been a better person if I hadn't read that book. That book just depressed me so much. It wasn't a bad book, by the way. But the snowflake generation wants smooth things. And so I said, well, how did it end? She said, I stayed on the phone. I didn't say goodbye. You always make these people be the first ones to say goodbye, okay? And you don't ever say goodbye, because they will be quick to say you hung up on them, and then they've got something against you. So she said, I just kind of sat there and let her vomit. Now that's a phrase that I heard many years ago, back in the 60s, from someone who used to be in some kind of business where he had to deal with people, a negotiator or something. And he said, what I would do with some people is just let them vomit. You just let them, and then as, I got a list of all their grievances, and then I would just tick them off and refute every one of them. So she said, but I just let her vomit. And when the woman was finished talking, I said, well, is there anything else you could tell me? And she said, well, no, that's about all. And I said, well, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. And so you could tell, she said, the young woman was almost disappointed that she didn't get an argument out of me. So there are some people that are just want to pout and be disgruntled, and you have to know that. One of the things that will happen to you when you get older, especially if your children are gone and now you have grandchildren, is there's a generation that are, let's say you're in your 70s and they're in their 40s. They tend to look at you as a child, and they tend to, if you forget something, they tend to look down on you like they're ready to commit you to some institution because you forgot something. They don't remember all the stuff they forgot. And as a matter of fact, 8-year-olds are just as forgetful sometimes as 70-year-olds, because one of my little 8-year-old grandchildren came out of a room and said, now, why did I come out? What was I looking for? Why did I come out of my room? I wanted something. We all do that, don't we? Or they'll forget something, leave something behind, when they've spent the night. But if you do that and you're older, you're suspect. You're under great suspicion, and they will treat you with great disrespect. Some of these people that are a generation below you. And I've heard a lot of women my age will complain about this. And I will tell you something that will be very helpful. And that is, you can do what this woman did on the phone. Because what you want to do is quench the fire. You don't want to stir it up. You don't want to start an argument. So what you can do is say, thank you for telling me. And smile. You'll find out they won't smile. But, this is also, I can connect it also to the way you dress. If you will dress with respect, there will be a little bit of a barrier there. They won't go so far when they're talking to someone who's dignified. And you don't want to ever lose your dignity around these people. So now I want to move on about home life. And home life, let me just mention 3 things that you have to be careful of as a young person. And that is, in the home, don't complain, criticize, or condemn. And I think that goes along with blame. Blame and punishment don't do anything. They don't progress. They don't build things. Blame, punishment, criticism, complaining, and condemning, the 3 C's, do not clean a room up. Criticizing, complaining, and condemning, the 3 C's, do not get the dishwasher unloaded. Criticizing, complaining, and condemning do not make you younger. Criticizing, complaining, and condemning do not make you successful. And I will tell you that if you're younger and you think you have so much time and that time is on your side so you can straighten up your attitude, you'll have plenty of time to straighten up your attitude. You'll have plenty of time to change your habits. You know, let me tell you, your habits go with you to your old age. That is such a shame, because if you've gotten in the habit of procrastinating, and by the way, if you'll join Fly Lady for just a short time, she has a day, I believe it's Wednesday, I'm not sure. It's called no procrastination day. That means you don't walk past something that needs to be put away and ignore it. You do something that you've always procrastinated and you've let it pile up. And but if you develop procrastination in housekeeping and homemaking when you're young, time is not going to be on your side. You're thinking, oh, I could probably always clean that up later. But if you bring those habits into your old age, you will find, like me, that you get to a certain age and time is not on your side. You don't have 20 years to fix something. You have to do it when you think of it. And so avoid the attitude that time is on your side and that you have plenty of time, because what you will do is you will end up, if you'll avoid that attitude and you develop the non-procrastination attitude, instead of saying, I have all the time in the world to learn to, let's say you want to learn to paint pictures. Don't wait, just go and learn and start practicing it, because that will carry you into your old age. And so, now, home living. Home living, it's an exercise in good citizenship. An exercise in good citizenship. I'm trying to check my time here. 30 minutes. If you've got something to do, please go and do it. The purpose of this video is so that you can fold something, so that you can sort something, so that you can clean something, so that you can accomplish something in your home. It's a companion, so you can walk around and listen to something the way I listen to videos when I am cleaning or fixing something. And I figured that in about 30 minutes you could make a bed and clean up a room. You might be able to wash your sink out, clean your bathroom up a little bit, and you might be able to cut a pattern out. I don't know. So I'm trying to go a little bit further than 30 minutes so that you could do a little bit more. And I meant to say this at the beginning of the video. As a matter of fact, I've got my refurbished computer that I ordered that came, and it's sitting there, and I'm thinking, it's really a lot easier to talk than it is to type. Maybe I'll just keep doing these videos. So young women, be sure and realize that home living is an exercise in good citizenship. Why is that? I told you we never talk down about our families. We never talk down about our country. We have an attitude in America that we can do anything. If we talk down about our country as being it's defeating, as being disloyal. And one of the problems that world leaders have always had throughout the ages is they could probably defend their country quite well from an enemy, but they are dealing with an attitude of the people. So if you have a hard time dealing with their attitude, you as a leader are going to have a hard time leading them forward. And so as a mother and as a homemaker, and if you're not married, as a young woman, you are going to be a better caregiver, a better guard, a better guide of the home if you can develop good attitudes. And in your home, if you do have a family, you are going to be able to lead them better if their attitude is good. Because if you have to fight that attitude and fight the behavior and fight the habits at the same time and guard all that, it's harder. The attitude is harder to deal with. So young women, be sure that you do not think that you have all the time in the world. So I wanted to discuss this thing about vinegar a little bit more. And I have the vinegar. Yes, we talked about vinegar last time, so I want to talk about it a little bit more. It's my favorite thing of the month right now. And you can, every kitchen, Every home, I don't care if they're rich or they're poor. You know, the Bible talks about these creatures that, whether they're in a palace, you know, Proverbs talks about the ant and the comey and the whatever and the spider. Doesn't matter what kind of house they're in, they have no prejudice. They can dwell in a palace, a mansion, a castle, and your humble little home. So it doesn't matter. It actually doesn't even matter how clean you are. These things come upon you. And so vinegar discourages ants. You can spray it around the edges of your floors, around the cabinet areas. You can spray it in your sink. You can spray it everywhere where you've seen them, and they don't like it and won't come back. And it won't be toxic. Little children can't find the little ant trap and poison themselves. So vinegar is great. Also, vinegar is great for static cling in your dryer. So that is one reason that I put it in the little rinse cycle. If you have forgotten, what you do is you take a wet washcloth and you soak it in vinegar and throw that in the dryer. Now, most of us in the country like to use our lines outside, but the clothing can smell a little sour out there too, because especially if us in farm country, you know, where they're harvesting and there's the wheat chaff and everything like that. And if I go out there to get my laundry, especially my towels, and they just smell a little bit off, you know, I don't want to wash them again. I will take my vinegar spray and just spray the towels, let them hang a little bit longer, and it seems to restore the freshness. So vinegar is also, we've known this forever, to get stains out of clothing. You soak it with vinegar and cold water. You can get any kind of stain out. The other thing is hair. Remember, we used to rinse our hair with it before cream rinse came along and all those rinses were available. We used vinegar for the brunettes and lemon juice for the blondes, and that was our final rinse on our hair. It took out the soap and it put a shine in the hair. So vinegar is also a really good solution to clean up after sickness. If someone's been sick and you have children, or there's been diapers and just, you know, the different things that you have, it sanitizes without intoxicating anybody. And so so I can't emphasize enough to go online and order yourself a little book on vinegar. You'll be absolutely amazed. Good for pets, good for people, good for your house. So now I'm going to move on to something really, really important that I want to pass on to you. I don't want to forget anything, so I have a little notebook here. Be careful. I've told you this in a video before. If you have something you're concerned about, whether it's your family, your homemaking, your country, your finances, be careful who you confide in. Because, like I said, if an enemy wants to defeat you, all they have to do is find something that's demoralizing you, that's discouraging you, and work on that. So if you tell somebody that it's inadvisable to confide anything in, or maybe you don't even know that they're against you, you tell somebody you're having a hard time financially and your husband lost his job, or your husband's, you know, pay got cut back, they're going to attack you, or they're going to say, aha, that homemaking business isn't all it's cracked up to be, and it's not working out, and they're having a hard time. And so you don't confide in just anybody. You have to be careful and choose people carefully who you talk to about what you're doing. And I think a lot of young women have found this out too, the ones that are at home, that decided to stay home and earn money at home. You have to be careful what you say to people. You have to be careful. You don't have to tell them. And do not tell people things that will come back on you and demoralize you. The important thing is to keep your mood happy and your mood up, because it affects the way you work. And so if you don't have hope, you know, this is another thing too. The Bible says hope we have as an anchor to the soul. Hope anchors the soul. Study about hope. You know, hope saves too. My husband has a little brochure out that talks about all the things that save, and one of them is hope. And hope is something that people rarely consider. They're always interested in what saves a man, what saves a person, but they overlook many of these little things that seem little. Hope saves you too. Even if something does not seem like it's going to work, like I'd like to rearrange this room and turn it into, you know, something else and do this. And even if it doesn't work, it's the doing of it that's where the happiness comes from, and the hope of succeeding. And it keeps your heart pumping. It keeps you alive. It keeps you healthy. Hope. Learn about hope. To have hope does not mean that things will be successful. It just means that it's something that anchors you. I wish people would understand this, because I've heard young people say, the most sickening thing I've ever heard is them say, I'm not going to have any hope for the future or for my success, because then if it doesn't work out, I won't be disappointed. What an awful thing to say. You know what? If you ever said that to me, I'd give you a spanking. That is just terrible. Talking down like that. I'd probably get beat up if I did, but anyway, I'll probably get written up about that one. Anyway, I have a book that I wanted to show you my book. I don't know if it was my daughter, my granddaughter, or me that put it together, but when we first got the internet, in the olden days, many years ago, we ran off some things that were free, and we made a book out of it. See here? We made a book out of it. It's one of these things. And put it in plastic sleeves. And so I'm going to read you some of it. And the first one was 6 things to do every day. Now this sounds very simplistic to some of you who are seasoned homemakers, and maybe some of you young ones probably read it and you'll say, I already knew that. You know something? I once taught a Bible class for children at church, and it was my turn to teach the class, and I was teaching them about some character in the Bible, and one of the children said, already heard that story. You know, these children, and you children, remember that Elizabeth Gaskell's story, our mutual friend, and there was this unusual woman that made dolls, and she would call them you children, and she'd call other people you children. Okay, you children, you have no trouble reading a child's book that you like over and over and over, or wanting your parents to read it to you over and over, or watching the same movie over and over and over, or listening to the same music over and over. But when it comes to some kind of good instruction, or even a Bible lesson, you'll say, I already heard that. Well, these are 6 things to do every day. We need to be reminded. You know, God told Moses to tell the people where they came from, what they're supposed to be doing, and where they were going, and to tell them to it again, and tell them to tell it to their children and to their children's children, and then remind them again. And even the Apostle Paul said, I put these things in remembrance to you. We have to be reminded, don't we? It's good to hear it. It's good reinforcement. So just reminding you people, this is simple, but we can get into a slump sometimes. So 6 things to do every day. Get into the habit of completing these basic daily tasks. With just a few minutes work, you'll easily be able to keep chaos at bay. Now I'm sitting in my sewing room. As you can see, in my sewing room, everything needs to be organized and cleaned up, but I always have something I'd rather sew instead, so I don't take the time to clean out all these places. But I have it as my goal, and I'm thinking about it, and it's the thought that counts, right? Okay. Number 1, make the bed. Tidiness begets tidiness. A crisply made bed makes the whole room seems more orderly. I always wondered why it crossed my mind when I was a little kid, why do we make the bed? We're just going to get in it and make it messy again. But it's even in the military, they'll make them make the bed and smooth out all the wrinkles, because it's demoralizing if you're in a mess. And this is part of the reason to make a bed and make it pretty. And of course, whole industries have made money off of bed making. I mean, the things you can do to make a bed pretty are just endless. And so a crisply made bed makes the whole room seem more orderly, which makes it less likely that you'll let other things, such as clothes and paper, pile up around. Gone 44 minutes. I might be able to last an hour. I heard my phone ring. I hope nobody wants me for anything. You know, sometimes I wonder about those phones. You can't escape. Everybody knows where you are. Okay, manage the clutter. Whenever you leave a room, take a quick look around for anything that isn't where it should be. Pick it up and put it where it belongs, Insist that everyone in the household do the same. Sort the mail. Take a few minutes to open, read, and sort the mail as soon as you bring it inside. Keep a trash bin near your sorting area. I used to keep it by the front door. For your junk mail, drop other mail into one of 4 boxes. Personal correspondence that needs to be answered, bills, catalogs, and filing. Clean as you cook. I like this one. Instead of filling the sink with pots and dishes, wash them or put them in the dishwasher as you prepare a meal. It's so nice to get up from a meal and not have the kitchen in total disarray. Wipe up spills while they're fresh. That's a good one to learn. Instead of filling, whether it is tomato sauce on the cooktop or makeup in the bathroom counter, almost anything is faster and easier to remove if you attend to it immediately. And I learned this years ago, not to wait for a cleaning day. You just clean as you go. This is a lot of the philosophy of the fast food restaurants, and one of the first lessons that the young people learn when they go to work there. Clean as you go. You don't wait for a cleaning day. Sweep the kitchen floor. Every evening, once you've finished washing up after dinner, sweep the kitchen floor. This will keep tough to clean dirt and grime from building up, which will make weekly mopping easier. Okay, those are the 6 things to do every day. And if you'll join Fly Lady, she will tell you before you go to bed, put out a clean dish towel. Isn't that wonderful? And if I had the time, and I hope to soon. Remember, hope we have as an anchor to the soul. I hope to make 7 beautiful aprons, a special one for Sunday, so that every day I can put on a clean apron. So if you don't have, feminine dresses to wear, you can wear an apron, and it'll make you feel more ladylike. I'm going to read you a couple poems before I quit, and then I'm going to go see what the big thing was with my phone, and so I am going to read Edgar A. Guest. Now, someone suggested I find... they said it couldn't be done. I'll do that next time. I couldn't find it online, and I've got it in a book. And I want to thank Amy in Idaho for sending me the Edgar A. Guest book. Edgar Guest was a newspaper columnist whose job it was in the 1940s to go around and collect things to fill in the newspaper, whether it was recipes or a poem or human interest stories. And after a while, when he couldn't find something, he would just make up a poem himself. And he ended up being one of America's greatest poets. And he reflected the attitude that America needed at the time, especially after a war, when they were rebuilding their lives and making the country work. He had an optimistic attitude, how to keep defeat from entering your heart, how to keep it out of your home. And he was called the family poet. So I'm going to read something here, and it's called It Takes a Heap of Living. It takes a heap of living to make a house a home, a heap of sun and shadow, and you sometimes have to roam afore you really appreciate the things you left behind, and hunger for 'em somehow with 'em always on your mind. If you don't make any difference, it don't make any difference how rich you get to be, how much your chairs and tables cost, how great the luxury. It ain't home to you, even though it be a palace of a king, unless somehow your soul is sort of wrapped around everything. Home ain't a place that gold can buy or get up in a minute. Afore it's a home, there's got to be a heap of living in it. Within the walls, there's got to be some babies born, and then right there, you've got to bring 'em up to women good and men, and gradually, as time goes on, you find you wouldn't part with anything they've ever used. They've grown into your heart. Hey, this suits me because I've got all this stuff. This suits me because I've got all this. I've got the archives here in my home. The archives of my family. So let me just continue. With anything they've ever used, they've grown into your heart. The old high chairs, yep, got those. The playthings too, yep. The little shoes they wore, you hoard, and if you could, you'd keep the thumb marks on the door. I do, I have those. You've got to weep to make it home. You've got to sit and sigh and watch beside a loved one's bed and know that death is nigh. We've done that, and in the stillness of the night see death's angel come and close the eyes of her that smiled and leave her sweet voice dumb. For those are scenes that grip the heart, and when your tears are dried, you find the home is dearer than it was, and sanctified, and tugging at you always, and tugging at you. Let's see if I can get this to work. And tugging at you always are the pleasant memories of her that was and is no more. You can't escape from these. You got to sing and dance for years. You got to romp and play and learn to love the things you have by using them each day. You know, I still have that old sifter of Grandma's, and I put my flour in it and sift the flour. And the flour's sifted. You know, you buy it at the store and it says sifted flour. I sift it anyway. I just love to feel it. Even the roses round the porch must blossom year by year afore they come a part of you, suggesting someone dear who used to love 'em long ago and trained 'em just to run the way they do so they would get the early morning sun. That's interesting about the older house. I live in an older house, and it was put in this place, and the windows put in a certain area to get different kinds of light and sun. You've got to love each brick and stone from cellar up to dome. It takes a heap of living in a house to make it home. Okay, now this is the next one that I really liked. And it was warning the men. This is when women generally stayed home. And so it is written to men. But you know, ladies, young and old, we need to take this because there's so much negative, and I cannot tell you how much negative thinking will destroy your home, and you're supposed to guard it and guide it. You cannot be a good general of your army if you're going to demoralize your troops. So this was written to the men of the time because work could be discouraging, and of course the news media was very prominent in those days too, and would tell you, the end is near and all that. So men could come home tired too, just tired, and also low blood sugar. They haven't eaten in a while, and they would be negative. So he wrote this wonderful poem. It is called At the Door. I just love it. He wiped his shoes before his door, but ere he entered, he did more. 'Twas not enough to cleanse his feet of dirt they'd gathered in the street. He stood and dusted off his mind, and left all trace of care behind. In here I will not take, said he, the stains the day has brought to me. Beyond this door shall never go the burdens that are mine to know. The day is done, and here I leave the petty things that vex and grieve. What clings to me of hate and sin, to them I will not carry in. Only the good shall go with me, for their devoted eyes to see. I will not burden them with cares, nor track the home with grim affairs. I will not at my table sit with soul uncleaned and mind unfit. Beyond this door I will not take the outward signs of inward ache. I will not take a dreary mind into this house for them to find. He wiped his shoes before the door, but paused to do a little more. He dusted off the strains of strife, the mud that's indecent to life, the blemishes of careless thought, the traces of the fight he'd fought, the selfish humors and the mean, and when he entered, it was clean. Let's see if I can find myself here. Okay, ladies, I hope this has helped you a lot. I've gone 53 minutes, and I hope you don't mind my messy sewing room, and I hope you'll take this to heart. Let's talk up. That's not to say we are blind to things that need to be done, but let's fix things. Instead of talking down, talk up and fix things. And you will find, if you get in a slump, let me tell you, I was talking to a friend on the phone the other day, and she brought out something that, I always knew it, but just her saying it made me realize it. If you are inactive and you sit too much, you can get depressed a lot more easily. But if you're up, the energy that you use seems to multiply, seems to produce more energy. So whether you're young or old, you can use that advice. If you're starting to get depressed and discouraged, you could be sitting too much. So you might have to even stay up a little later, get up a little earlier, and get some things done. I'm hoping that I can get some things done today, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Please, please, please leave me a comment. Thank you and goodbye.